The film begins with Suzette on the day of her wedding, surrounded by friends and family celebrating her union with her fiancé. Meanwhile, Digsy sits alone by the roadside, feeling dejected. Suzette was not only his best friend but also the object of his unspoken affection. Despite his deep feelings for her, he never found the courage to reveal them. Observing his sadness, Daphne, a mutual friend, approaches Digsy and offers him some encouraging words, reminding him that there are plenty of other women out there. Later that evening, Digsy finds himself pouring out his emotions in a series of voicemails to Suzette, confessing his love but hesitating to hit send. In search of solace, Digsy heads to a local bar, where he meets Mortimer, who strikes up a conversation by offering him a drink. Mortimer shares his own heart-wrenching story about a woman he once loved, who betrayed him by having an affair with his best friend. He learned of this painful truth when he unexpectedly returned home early one day. Although devastated, Mortimer's life took a turn when an elderly woman gifted him a magical key that transformed his existence. Before leaving, Mortimer hands this key to Digsy, accompanied by a note. As Digsy reads the note, he discovers it contains instructions revealing that the key opens a door to a parallel universe, but warns that once someone steps through, they can never return to their original world. Initially dismissing it as a prank, Digsy returns home and falls asleep. The next morning, he places the key on the table and heads to Suzette's wedding reception. When he encounters Suzette, she inquires if he has something to share, to which Digsy nervously responds that he only needs her assistance with his new book. After Digsy gets back home, he casually begins jotting down the advantages and disadvantages of traveling to a parallel universe on a sheet of paper. Later, he makes his way to the library, where his eyes are drawn to a book titled Parallel Universe, sparking memories of his magical key. He decides to try the key on the library door, but his attempt is interrupted by a woman walking in. Even at the cafe, he immerses himself in exploring the intricacies of the parallel universe on his laptop. Back at home, while Digsy is lost in thoughts about this alternate reality, Daphne unexpectedly drops by. She's quite upset with him for ignoring her messages, but her mood shifts when she spots the paper listing the pros and cons of parallel universe travel. Digsy finds himself explaining everything to her, and although she questions his sanity, she encourages him to take the plunge. If it doesn't pan out, she promises to introduce him to Amy, the girl with the big round eyes. Taking Daphne's advice to heart, Digsy dresses up nicely, ready to unlock the door with the key. However, when he opens it, everything on the other side looks completely ordinary. Daphne playfully shoves him out and closes the door behind him. When he knocks, a woman named Karen answers and tells him to leave before slamming the door shut. Puzzled, Digsy puts the key back in the door and tries again. To his astonishment, he steps into a stunning city, realizing the key's magic is genuine. Elated, he revels in the beauty of the city for a while before using the key again, which leads him to Suzette's office. In this reality, he is Suzette's husband, but he quickly realizes their relationship is troubled and not what he desires. So, he uses the key once more and finds himself in a restaurant where he encounters both Suzette and Daphne again. Out of nowhere, Digsy's wife from this dimension appears, cradling a baby and placing the little one in his arms. Yet, noticing his odd demeanor with the infant, she quickly takes the child back. She also realizes that his wedding ring is missing, leading her to suspect that Digsy might be unfaithful. In a twist, Digsy uses the key once more and leaps into a different realm, where he meets a chatty blue-haired Suzette. Her constant chatter drives him to exit this world as well. Soon, he finds himself on a beach, where he sees Suzette sunbathing. She asks him to put sunscreen on her back, and he gladly obliges. However, after a short time, the Digsy from this universe shows up, prompting the current Digsy to jump to yet another world. His adventure continues as he hops from one universe to another in search of his true love. In some realities, he encounters a pregnant Suzette, while in others, he finds himself wed to someone entirely different. Eventually, he meets what seems to be the perfect version of Suzette, and they share a passionate kiss. But just as things heat up, Digsy excuses himself to use the restroom and accidentally opens the door with the key, sending him spiraling into yet another universe. Frustrated and disappointed, he scolds himself for his reckless mistake. Later, Digsy visits a laundromat to drop off his clothes, having worn the same outfit for days. Afterward, he heads to a cafe where he tries to swipe some food, but barista Gwen arrives just in time to catch him. She asks if he wants his usual order, and in a bid to fit in, he agrees. However, Gwen finds his behavior peculiar, as if he doesn't recognize her at all, leading her to share her concerns with him. At that moment, the Digsy from this realm makes an entrance, prompting the current Digsy to duck under the table in surprise. Once the other Digsy departs, Gwen approaches the one hiding and expresses her curiosity about his unusual predicament, questioning whether he might be a twin or a clone. Digsy replies that it's a complicated tale. Captivated, Gwen insists she wants to hear the full story and asks him to wait until her shift ends. Later that evening, in a bar, Diggsy shares his entire saga with Gwen, detailing his encounters with different versions of Suzette and his fruitless quest for the ideal Suzette. Gwen advises him that searching for Suzette in this way is futile, as each version from alternate worlds will always remain a stranger to him. She encourages him to let go of this unattainable dream and not to waste his life chasing it. Gwen then invites him to her home for a chance to savor an 18-year-old bourbon whiskey together, which Diggsy gladly accepts. Once at her place, they begin to enjoy the whiskey, and unexpectedly, Gwen leans in to kiss Diggsy, which he reciprocates with enthusiasm. They quickly grow comfortable with one another, engaging in fun activities like strip karaoke and building a snack tower, eventually leading to a more intimate connection. The following morning, Diggsy prepares to leave this universe, finding himself by a pool, deep in thought. Soon after, Daphne arrives and is shocked to see him. Before he can explain, she joyfully leaps onto him, and they both tumble into the pool. Later, Diggsy learns that he is Daphne's late husband in this world. He recounts his incredible journey to her, sharing tales of his adventures through parallel universes. Daphne, filled with curiosity, inquires about the workings of the parallel universe, leading Diggsy to illustrate his explanation with an analogy involving candies from a jar. He then turns the conversation to the Suzette of this universe. Daphne candidly shares that the Suzette here is quite unpleasant, which is why they never formed a friendship. The following morning, Daphne notices that Diggsy is preparing to leave and attempts to persuade him to stay by highlighting that there's no other Diggsy in her world. Nevertheless, Diggsy is resolute in his decision to pursue his quest. As Daphne embraces him for a farewell, the door unexpectedly slams shut behind her, leaving her trapped in the parallel universe with Diggsy. Determined to stay optimistic, she takes a shower and changes into fresh clothes from the stranger's apartment. Once they step outside, they are greeted by Daphne's friend Penelope, who rushes over and kisses her passionately. It quickly becomes clear that in this reality, Daphne is a lesbian and in a romantic relationship with Penelope. Together, Diggsy and Daphne embark on adventures through various universes, making unforgettable memories. One day, while relaxing on the beach, Daphne curiously asks Diggsy what drew him to Suzette. He fondly recalls their childhood days spent playing hide and seek, when Suzette took his hand and led him to hide behind the bushes, where they shared laughter and joy, igniting his feelings for her. He mentions that while he never actually kissed the real Suzette, he did share a kiss with one of her counterparts from a parallel universe. Later that evening, Daphne inquires of Diggsy whether all girls have soft lips or if it's just Penelope's that are particularly soft. Diggsy admits he's not really an authority on the subject. In truth, Penelope's kiss had ignited Daphne's realization of her own feelings for women. The following day, the pair continues their adventure and stumbles upon a lively party. Diggsy expresses a desire to leave, but Daphne persuades him to unwind and enjoy the festivities. He finds a spot in the corner with a drink, but soon after, he approaches Daphne only to discover she has shared their entire journey through parallel universes with the other guests. When two guys at the party ask Diggsy how the key functions, he feigns ignorance. Just as he attempts to unlock the door with the key, a partygoer named Franklin suddenly grabs it from him and uses it to open the door. To everyone's surprise, the scene beyond appears completely ordinary, prompting another guest to urge him to try again. When he opens the door once more, everyone gasps as the view outside has dramatically transformed. However, Diggsy quickly pushes Franklin out and closes the door. When Franklin's friend requests him to return, Diggsy opens the door again and steps into another world with Daphne. In this universe, Suzette is a bartender with an irresistible charm. During their conversation, she reveals to Diggsy that she had a crush on him back in college. Meanwhile, Daphne, inspired by her recent kiss with Penelope, starts to flirt with Suzette. This doesn't sit well with Diggsy, who confronts Daphne about her advances. Later, the three of them share drinks, and the chemistry between Daphne and Suzette becomes palpable. Suzette invites them to her place, and they agree. However, Diggsy soon falls asleep from the drinks, leaving the two women to explore their connection in private. The following morning, a nervous Daphne tells Diggsy about her enchanting night with Suzette, expressing how incredible it felt and her decision to stay in this universe with her. With a bittersweet farewell, Diggsy and Daphne share a heartfelt hug before he sets off to another universe, where he spends time reflecting on his life by the beach before eventually heading to Suzette's home. He discovers Suzette resting on a hospital bed. When she sees Diggsy, she questions why he has finally come back into her life after so many years. Diggsy clarifies that he isn't the Diggsy she remembers, he hails from a parallel universe. At first, Suzette thinks he's joking, but when she notices the absence of a tattoo on his hand, one that the Diggsy from her world has, she begins to reconsider. Diggsy recounts his journey through various universes, searching for his ideal Suzette, yet he hasn't found her. He expresses that she could be the one he's been looking for, but Suzette reveals that her time is limited as she is fighting stage 3 cancer. She shares her insights, telling him that no matter which Suzette he meets, she will never be the one he truly desires. She encourages him to embrace his reality and make the most of his life. After their heartfelt exchange, Digsy softly kisses her forehead and says farewell to this universe. Despite his numerous travels across different realms, Digsy's quest for his perfect Suzette begins to wane, leaving him less motivated. One day, after leaving a coffee shop, he runs into Gwen again and decides to follow her inside. Sensing his interest, Gwen inquires if they are acquainted. Digsy replies that she resembles someone he knows. Curious about the person Digsy mentioned, Gwen prompts him to elaborate, and he recounts his entire tale, including the enchanting story of the key. Impressed by his narrative, Gwen invites Digsy to her home, where she nonchalantly changes her top in front of him. She offers him a glass of 18-year-old whiskey, but Digsy reveals that he has already shared the drink with another version of her from a different realm. He reflects on how some individuals remain unchanged, no matter the universe, which leads to a passionate kiss between them. Ultimately, Digsy decides to make this world his home alongside Gwen and starts looking for employment. Gwen proposes a position at her coffee shop, which he eagerly accepts. Later that evening, Gwen inquires about Digsy's plans for the key, and he mentions tossing it aside, but she advises against it, suggesting it might be useful in the future. The following day, Digsy places the key in a jar and heads to the library, where he spots a typewriter. Inspired, he contemplates writing a book about his adventures. One day, while manning the cash register, he unexpectedly runs into Suzette, who has come in for coffee. She lights up at the sight of him and admits she had prepared a speech for their meeting, but now feels nervous. However, she quickly notices that Digsy's birthmark is absent and questions him about it, but he deftly shifts the conversation. Picking up on his odd demeanor, Suzette suggests they grab a drink to chat more comfortably, and Digsy agrees. After his shift, they meet at a bar, where Digsy shares the full extent of his journey. Suzette then reveals that in this world, Digsy is already married to someone else. To their astonishment, they realize they both share childhood memories of hiding in the bushes, which happens to be one of Digsy's cherished recollections. After Digsy gets back home, Gwen feels a sense of joy for him as he has made new friends, but he keeps his encounter with Suzette a secret. As they share a kiss, Gwen pauses to grab something meaningful from the room. Just then, Suzette knocks on the door and reveals to Digsy that they were engaged in this world, but she had called off the wedding at the last minute, a decision she has regretted ever since. She asks Digsy what he would do if she were still his Suzette. Before he can answer, Suzette leans in to kiss him, and at that moment, Gwen steps out of the room and sees everything unfold. Furious, she unlocks the door and tells them to leave for a new world and start over, claiming that Suzette is desperate for love. Enraged by Gwen's words, Suzette shoves her out and slams the door shut. Devastated by the loss of Gwen, Digsy breaks down in tears. Suzette offers an apology, admitting she doesn't understand how the key works, but without saying a word, Digsy opens the door again and steps into another world. He finds a quiet spot by a lake, where he allows his emotions to flow freely in tears. Afterward, he decides to toss the key into the river and embrace a fresh start. He secures a job and rents a new place, decorating it to reflect his personality. Over time, he makes new friends and buys a typewriter to document his remarkable journey in a book. After months of hard work, he completes his manuscript and sees it published. One day, as he exits a bookstore, he is stunned to see a short-haired Gwen walking past him. Hope sparkles in his eyes, and a smile spreads across his face. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. Chat